Hey, welcome to Let It Be. I'm Vanessa, and this is my little corner of music YouTube. Recently, I've had a lot of new people join. My 1973 video did a lot better than I expected, so that was a nice surprise. So if you're new here and you joined me since then, happy to have you here. Welcome. So this is a little something different to that. It's actually a review for a new album that came out this year by Crowded House called Gravity Stairs. So I listen to a lot of new music. I haven't really focused on it too much on my own channel, but I typically listen to probably 5 to 10 new releases each week of what was released. And so that adds up. I've heard quite a bit. And yeah, it's definitely a side passion of mine, aside from listening to older music, making lists, going back into years. I like to keep up with what's happening now too, because I think that's important. I do think that there's lots of great stuff coming out now, as well as what has happened in the past. Every year has great stuff, if you know where to look. So yeah, anyway. So I just figured this album was actually a bit of a surprise. Even with that in consideration, I had originally not planned to listen to this particular release when it came out. I like Crowded House well enough. I'm not super well versed, I wouldn't say, but I do know, all the big hits. I'd heard Temple of Low Men before, and I thought it was okay. I actually was more familiar with the Split Enz discography than Crowded House going into this. But yeah, but because I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the band before this, I just wasn't going to check out this new album. There's a lot of albums that come out by artists that have long careers, and sometimes you get to them, sometimes you don't. There's just in the interest of time, a lot of the time, they do end up being more something that is interesting to an existing fan of the band, maybe, and maybe not necessarily something that at this point in a career brings somebody new in, generally speaking. This is not always true, of course, and obviously here it's not true either. So anyway, I wasn't planning to listen to this album originally. A few weeks had passed before I got to it, and as time had passed, a couple people that I tend to have a lot in common with taste-wise ended up listening to it and really liking it. So that made me interested in it and made me want to check it out. So finally I did. And I was really surprised by how much I love this album. I was expecting even to like it going into it, but it even exceeded my expectations then. So yeah, you gotta love when that happens. I think that from what I've heard, I went back and I listened to Crowded House's first 4 albums after getting into this, but it seems like this is a bit of a departure from what the sound they're known for, at least. I'm not sure what they've been doing in more recent times, and if you're watching this and you're super familiar with them and you think that maybe I should go back and check those out, just let me know, because, I'm always open to do that. But yeah, I think that this album is quite a departure from what I've heard from them before. And for me, this sound is more in my wheelhouse. Like I said, I went back and listened to their first 4 albums and I liked them all. And there's some great songs on all of them. But I still like this one more than those. So I don't know what you can take from that. But anyway, so I think that the songwriting here, and always, but the songwriting here is just great. Like they've written some really wonderful songs, and I like the production sound style and the sound that they've gone for here. This is more in my wheelhouse, like I said. Sort of reminds me a little bit of Wilco at times, but not totally. But I'd say like they definitely, I think, were inspired a bit by some of the direction that they've been going in the last few years. But they're making it their own. They're doing their own thing with it. And it's a bit of a different style of songwriting too, I think. But yeah, it starts off wonderfully with Magic Piano. I think that's a really great song. And like when I heard that, I was like, oh, okay, wow, this is gonna be even better than I thought. So it's just, especially when that first chorus hits, it's just so satisfying. And that was the moment that I really started paying attention to this. And then it flows so well right into teenage summer. It sounds exactly like the title. It evokes that feeling of being a teenager in the summertime and like yearning for some romance and like it's got that mood down pat. Like it sounds great. And like the howl flows nicely into those first two songs. And then my favorite song on the album is All That I Can Ever Own. It's gorgeous. And that's probably the one that most reminds me of Wilco, I would say, maybe. But it's just, there's something about it that the way that it's structured is really cool. Like I love how the chorus sort of starts like it's going to be really melancholy and maybe kind of sad, and then it just kind of shifts into something more bright and positive sounding. And it has this fantastic bridge on it. Like it's just such a fantastic song. The single in advance that I had actually heard before the album, a couple months before it came out, was called Oh Hi. And that would be the song that I think they chose well. I think that is the song that you would pick here to be a single. It's really catchy and it's a fun song. It's not my favorite, it turns out, but it's still a good song. I still like it. It continues on in like I'm not going to go through every single song, but I would say that for the first three quarters of this album, I think it flows very well. I think it all kind of comes together in just a cohesive package. And I think that there's enough variety happening to keep you interested, but it all has a cohesion to it. Now, near the end is where it sort of, I think, I don't know what happens in those last few songs. They're still good and they still fit with everything, but they kind of lose me just a little bit as far as like keeping me as engaged as that first three quarters of the album. I think that's really like if everything kept up at that level for me, this would be like a 4.5 star album because I love that. But then those last few songs just sort of, I don't know, they just kind of taper off just enough that it does affect my feelings of the album a little bit. So it does bring me down to a very high 4 stars for the album. But even still, I mean, that I was not expecting to listen to this album and get it to a high 4 stars. And it actually puts it in the upper echelon of the year for me as of right now. So it's still like it's still a fantastic album. I'd say it's definitely worth checking out, especially if you're not necessarily a Crowded House fan. So maybe this will be a pleasant surprise for you too if you really have no expectations of the band or history with the band. I am not, it does seem to be also an album from what I've seen that fans of the band overall like. So I think that they don't totally alienate their core audience or anything. Like it's not like some crazy, like they're night and day or anything. There's a lot of things like about Neil Finn's songwriting. I think the core things, the elements are still there. So I think it's just a bit of a shift in sound, maybe. But yeah, I would be interested to hear that from people who are longtime fans of the band, how they felt about it and how it went over for them, because obviously I like it more than anything else I've heard from the band. So in the end, this ended up being a huge surprise for me. And my favorite thing I've heard from them so far. I went in with no real expectations other than that I would probably at least like it. But I ended up loving it. So that is always something that is welcome. I'm always happy to have that happen. And yeah, so have you heard this album? What do you think of it? What would you rate it? And if you're a fan of the band, where would it fit into their discography for you? And yeah, till next time. Bye.